I only met Arabelle Porter once, Arabelle Porter Walker. It was in June of 1970. I was about 10 years old. I wrote this, and she was 84. It was 1 year before her death, and we have a 1-minute home movie clip of that visit. And I remember Arabelle sitting in her bed. It seemed like she was bedfast. I wondered how she took care of herself living there all alone. And Arabelle's buried here. Where's she at? Right back there, Walker. Her and her husband and her son, right? Okay. At that time, I didn't really know who she was, just some old lady who was related somehow. I remember she sat in her bed and she gave her testimony of how God had saved her and kept her. And I remember she read something and even sang us a hymn. And her ceiling seemed to be caving in over her bed. Her house was very small. It seemed like a little shack to me. She had an old outhouse with a Jesus Save sign over the door. At that time, I thought, wow, this little old lady has nothing. She has no one. She lives in this little shack in the middle of nowhere by herself with no running water. What does she have to live for? And in later years, as I started researching our family history, I learned even more about Arabelle. I learned how she loved to attend church, how she loved to teach Sunday school, how she loved to sing, how strongly she believed in paying her tithes, and how she believed in the power of prayer. After her and Boone Walker married, she learned that they could not have children of their own, so they chose to adopt a son and daughter. I'm sure they were proud of them. They loved them as their own. Their family pictures of their 2 children show that. Arabelle loved children, but never got to enjoy any grandchildren of her own. Arabelle lost her 18-year-old daughter, Goldie, in 1925 in childbirth. And a few years later, in 1932, their 22-year-old son, Warner, was killed in a hunting accident. At that point, many people would question God. Some would say, my God, why have you forsaken me? And maybe Arabelle asked God that question, I don't know. The day I met Arabelle in 1970, she had been a widow for over 3 years. That day I saw a lady who I thought had nothing, an old lady who was poor, alone, bedfast, widowed, childless, and hopeless. But as I think back, I realize that Arabelle saw things in a different way. Arabelle had placed her faith in her God. She testified of His love toward her. No matter all the difficulties that she had been through, she had not lost her faith in God. She believed that He would take care of her and see her through to the end. I've often wondered why, when hard times come, some people run to God and some people run away. Arabelle was definitely one who ran to God. He was her everything. The things of this world were not important to her. Hebrews chapter 11 is known as the Hall of Faith. It talks about great patriarchs of the Bible. Abel, Enoch, Noah, Abraham, Moses, and so on. Men and women who by faith obeyed God. And all these, having gained approval through their faith, did not receive what was promised. But God had provided something better for us. Hebrews 11:39 and 40. Arabelle did not obtain worldly wealth as we know it, but she laid up her treasures in heaven. Her life is an example to us, and I hope that each of us can learn from Arabelle that no matter what comes our way, when life is not fair, if we keep our faith in God, He will take care of us. Hebrews 11:6 says, without faith it's impossible to please Him. So I thought of what a great example she was, and some of our other forefathers. None of them were perfect. Even Arabelle wasn't perfect. I've heard other stories about her imperfections. So all of our ancestors out here had their flaws. Some had more than others. But at times, many of them had great faith. That's an example for us. A little later, in Hebrews, I think it's Hebrews 12:1, it talks about this great cloud of witnesses we're surrounded by. And I don't know, maybe you can straighten me out on this, Ed, that I wonder, what's that? I don't know exactly what that means. This great cloud of witnesses, does that mean, like maybe right now they're peeking down at us, say, yep, there's our great-grandkids down there, or our daughter, our grandson. Maybe they're looking down, go, go. Maybe they're cheering us on. I don't know. You know, a few weeks ago, our pastor, he talked about this Ironman race they have in Hawaii every year. And I don't know a whole lot about it, but it's like a 24-hour race where they swim and they ride bikes and they run, and it's a very hard race. But the people at the finish line are cheering as each person crosses that line. They're hanging over, they're yelling, "Go, go, go!" They're calling them by name, and they're crossing that line. And is that maybe what that means, that great cloud of witnesses? I mean, is it the example they set before us that says, go, go, go? Or maybe they're even peeking over, go, go, go? I don't know. But that leads us to a song that Vicky's got for us about this. It starts out, I think, about this cloud of witnesses. So come on up, Vicky, and
You expect me to sing that?
yep.
Before Vicky sings, let me add just a little bit to
Please do.
Arabelle. Little is much if God is in it. The Methodist preacher at Olive Hill always, Jenny pastored out here, the same pastor at Olive Hill, Jenny pastored out here at Porter Creek. He said, this came from him. He said, I was out there doing a little work, and I started home. And when I passed the road where you turn into Arabelle, I felt the Spirit said, you ought to check on Arabelle. He said, well, I'll be back up here in a few days, and I'll check on her then. But he said, the farther I drove, the more the Spirit said you ought to check on Arabelle. And he said, I got down Burley Mayberry somewhere, and I turned around and went back. The door's always open. I went in, and I said, how you Arabelle? Oh, I'm just great. I'm just great. He said, well, I made a mistake, you know. Well, I thought, Arabelle, I just felt like I ought to come check on her. He said, I thought there's something wrong. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. I almost forgot. Said, would you screw that light bulb out there and put me another light bulb, go in the kitchen, get another light bulb put in there. Said, I just prayed a while ago, and I said, Lord, my light went out last night, and I laid in the dark. And I said, Lord, I can't get up there and put that light bulb in. Could you send somebody by and do it for me? Said, I almost forgot. Little is much if God is in it.
That was J.C. Harris. That came back.
Yeah.
J.C. Harris.
Yeah.
But one Christmas, Clyde and I, there was a big snow on the ground. And he said, we had a big dinner on the table, and he said, well, let's take Aunt Arabelle some. So he fixed the horses up, or the mules, whatever. And we went over there in the sled. And she was so hungry, she ate with her hands. And she had a little, do you know about her little dog, Billy Graham? Billy Graham. Well, she fed Billy Graham too.
Yeah.
But I think Ed and them used to come and mow her yard, but you know, the neighbors checked on her. That's yeah, Farwood. I mopped her kitchen. She said it hadn't been mopped in a year. One time.
She had a pet snake, didn't she?
She had a pet snake.
What was his name?
I don't know what she called it. It was a black snake. It stayed in the house.
Well, we was gonna kill it. She wouldn't let us kill it.
Oh.
I was just little.
Yeah.
We was gonna kill a snake, and she said no, it was her pet.
And she had a pet turtle that came to the door, and she'd feed it like bread.
What was its name?
I don't know. She had told me, but I forgot. But Uncle Boone, as hot as it would be in the summer, she would cover him up with 2 or 3 coats and quilts and everything, and she'd pet him and rub his head. So she wanted him to be comfortable.